It amazes me that to convince black people that Donald Trump cares about them, he takes pictures with celebrities. It's amazing to me. If Donald Trump cared about black people, he wouldn't have denigrated the president with those claims of birtherism.
But part of that is starting off with Snoop Dogg and Nelly and Soulja Boy and others for their decisions to perform at events surrounding the inauguration.
It started with one clip, just a few seconds long, but enough to reignite one of hip-hop's most uncomfortable conversations. D.L. Hughley's words didn't just challenge politics, they challenged loyalty, image, and identity. Because when Snoop Dogg, the same man who once ridiculed others for standing beside Donald Trump, appeared at a Trump-affiliated event, the internet didn't hesitate. Screenshots turned to headlines. Headlines turned to debates. Hughley and Katt Williams didn't just comment, they drew a line in the sand. According to online discussions, what began as a quiet political disagreement exploded into a symbolic clash over what hip-hop stands for in 2025. Was this Snoop's evolution or his betrayal? That's the question echoing through every comment section tonight.
But the most important thing is there's got to be a solution, because this has been going on in the industry for a whole bunch of years, for decades. And at the same time, you know, nobody wants it to be true, and it shouldn't have to be true. But if we don't fix it and do something about it, history will constantly
repeat itself. Now, Suge, you said something early on that I want to get clarification for the audience. Suge, you said early on, you can't just look at Diddy in isolation. You said this was done to him. He learned from others, and it was done to him, and then he did to others. To me, that sounds like what I hear when people are talking about abusive situations, you know, hurt people, that someone was sexually abused, they wind up being a perpetrator. Is that what you're suggesting about Sean Combs, that he was sexually abused and he now sexually abuses?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think he repeat what was done to him. And like I said, if you look at Russell Simmons, you know the truth. Andre Rell, you know the truth. Clyde Davis, you know the truth. Jimmy Iovine, you know the truth. So there's not certain things that all of a sudden you got this. The industry is a quick business. It's been like that for a long time. And the casting couch is
The moment that clip surfaced, everything changed. This wasn't the usual celebrity back and forth. It wasn't a diss track, a talk show jab, or a playful roast. This was deeper, an open question about integrity. Katt Williams, known for his unfiltered truth-telling, reportedly echoed DL's criticism, questioning how someone who built a career on rebellion could suddenly align himself with the very establishment he once mocked. Online discussions speculate that both comedians weren't just calling out Snoop. They were calling out an entire generation of artists who've blurred the line between influence and allegiance. In the eyes of many fans, it wasn't about Trump or politics. It was about principle, about watching a man who once symbolized resistance now standing shoulder to shoulder with the system he rejected. But what drove Snoop to this point? Was it strategy or survival? Because in an industry built on reinvention, sometimes evolution can look a lot like betrayal.
So ain't nobody gonna perform for Donald Trump, huh? Which one of you jigaboo ass niggas gonna be the first one to do it? I'm waiting. I'm gonna roast the fuck out one of you Uncle Tom ass niggas for doing it. Which one of you niggas gonna do it first? I was the one that performs for himself.
It always starts small. A repost, a quote, a clip pulled from the past. But this time, the internet didn't just revisit history, it weaponized it. D.L. Hughley's repost of that old Snoop video became a spark in a room filled with gasoline. Suddenly, timelines were flooded with side-by-side comparisons. 2017 Snoop, the critic, 2025 Snoop, the performer. According to social media reactions, the hypocrisy was hard to ignore. Fans who once saw Snoop as hip-hop's moral compass were now questioning whether fame and longevity had blurred his principles. And that's where Katt Williams came in, amplifying the tension with that sharp, surgical wit he's known for. Online commentary suggests Katt didn't just agree with DL, he twisted the knife, using humor to underline what others wouldn't dare say out loud, that sometimes the system doesn't change you, you change for the system. So what really pushed DL and Katt to speak up now? Was it about politics, or about watching one of their own drift too far from the culture that made him?
Chill, I'm not performing. I am in Washington, D.C. right now, but I'm not performing. It's a private vibe I'm doing with my brother Snoop Dogg.
That clip hit like a time bomb, 7 years old, yet more relevant than ever. Back then, Snoop's words carried the raw energy of protest, the tone of a man fed up with compromise. But now, in 2025, that same energy has been turned against him. D.L. Hughley's caption didn't need to say much. The internet filled in the blanks. According to comment threads, the post was less of an accusation and more of a mirror, forcing Snoop to look at himself from a time when he was the one doing the calling out. Memes followed within minutes. Old interviews resurfaced. Commentators dissected every second like detectives at a crime scene. And yet, beneath all the laughter and outrage, there was something heavier. People weren't just mocking Snoop. They were mourning the version of him they thought they knew. The rebel, the voice of the streets, the man who told America exactly what he thought, without filters or fear. It wasn't just hypocrisy they were reacting to. It was the heartbreak of watching a cultural symbol lose his edge. And now, every frame, every word from that old clip feels like it's haunting Snoop in real time. Was this poetic justice or public punishment?
I'm clueless on a lot of things when it get down to it. You know what I mean? Like they started putting 2 and 3 things. You think you voting for one thing and come to find out you was voting for 2 or 3 things. So I would feel messed up in my head if I told some brother or some sister, yo, you should vote for this. This is going to help black businesses. But in that, at the same time, I didn't know that voting for that would take away from your Medicaid. And then that's what directly would have affected you. Then now I feel effed up. You know what I'm saying? Like, damn, I didn't know that.
That line, "Which one of you Uncle Toms is going to do it?" aged like a prophecy that turned on its author. It was the kind of phrase that defined an era, defiant, sharp, and fearless. And now, years later, it's being replayed in slow motion, not as rebellion, but as evidence. According to online reactions, fans aren't just angry, they're conflicted, because for decades, Snoop represented truth. He was that rare artist who survived scandals, label wars, and industry shifts without losing his authenticity. But now that authenticity feels compromised. Commenters on YouTube and X argue that Snoop's 2025 appearance wasn't about politics at all. It was about image control, survival, and staying relevant in an era where silence equals erasure. Others defend him, saying it's just business, that legends adapt because the industry doesn't reward purity anymore. Still, the optics are powerful. The man who once mocked others for selling out now stands accused of doing the same thing. And no matter how it's explained, perception has already written the story for him. Was Snoop's move a strategy to stay in control, or the moment he finally lost it? It's the kind of irony you can't script. The man who once stood as a voice of resistance now being accused of performing for the same figure he once ridiculed. But this isn't just about one event, one stage, or one check. It's about what happens when legacy collides with survival, when the rebel becomes the brand, and the message starts serving the image instead of the other way around online. The reactions came fast. Some defended Snoop, arguing that politics shouldn't dictate who an artist performs for. Others saw something far more calculated, a man playing both sides of the cultural fence. And then came the quiet voices, the ones who weren't angry but disappointed, the fans who grew up on gin and juice and Murder Was the Case, who remembered when Snoop's voice felt like a protest in itself. What made this moment sting wasn't the politics, it was the symbolism. The image of Snoop standing under red and blue lights, performing for a crowd that didn't come up with him, that never lived what his music stood for. It was a visual contradiction that hit harder than any caption could explain. And that's when the storm got louder. Katt Williams, never one to bite his tongue, allegedly added fuel to the fire, calling the whole thing a performance of convenience. His tone wasn't angry, it was disappointed, like a man watching the last real rebel of hip-hop trade in his stripes for comfort. According to audience reactions, Katt's words echoed what many were thinking. That authenticity, the same thing Snoop once demanded from others, had finally caught up with him. Meanwhile, D.L. Hughley doubled down. His Instagram Live became the center of a cultural debate, not about Trump, not even about race, but about loyalty, the kind of loyalty that built hip-hop from protest into power. He questioned, how can you preach resistance and then pose for the same system you told us to fight? Every soundbite hit like a punch. Every repost became a headline. And while the internet laughed, dissected, and debated, Snoop stayed silent. That silence became its own message, one that people read in 1,000 different ways. Was he unbothered? Was he guilty? Or had he simply outgrown the version of himself that the world refused to let go of? Because that's the real tension underneath this story. Not politics, but evolution. What happens when the world wants you frozen in your prime, forever rebellious, forever defiant, while you're trying to play a longer game? Industry insiders, speaking cautiously, suggested that Snoop's move might have been more strategic than anyone realized. Some pointed out that aligning with political figures, even temporarily, can open powerful doors. Doors that lead to ownership, licensing, and global influence, but fans weren't hearing that. To them, strategy looked a lot like selling out. And that's the paradox of fame. When you stand for something too long, even your silence becomes suspicious. As D.L. Hughley's clip continued to circulate, threads started pulling at old memories, Snoop's public comments from years past, his relationship with Suge Knight, and those long-standing whispers about his allegiances behind the scenes. A full cultural rewind had begun. Then came Suge's name, a name that always drags ghosts out of hip-hop's past. From behind bars, he reportedly threw another punch into the conversation, reviving accusations that Snoop had never been as loyal to Tupac as he claimed, that he'd always been more survivor than soldier. And though these claims were unverified, the timing made them sting. Suddenly, this wasn't just about politics anymore, it was about pattern, about whether Snoop's career was built on loyalty or self-preservation. And the more people revisited his past, the more they found moments that could be read either way. Old interviews resurfaced, Snoop's reflections on how he distanced himself from death row, how he stayed out of the crossfire that consumed others at the time. It looked like wisdom. Now fans wondered if it was something else entirely. On social media, the narrative twisted fast. Snoop never gets canceled. He's untouchable. He's the industry's favorite. Some saw that as proof of his savvy, others as proof of his connections. And when the internet starts asking how someone keeps winning while everyone else falls, the answers get darker with every thread. Comment sections filled with speculation. Some claimed Snoop's rise was the result of smart branding. Others whispered about backroom deals and old alliances. But no matter which side they stood on, everyone agreed on one thing. This was the first time in decades that Snoop's image had started to crack, and that's the power of a single moment. Decades of credibility can unravel with one performance. Because in the age of receipts and replays, your past will always come back for you, especially if it contradicts your present. Even Nelly, who shared the stage that night, tried to explain it away. He said it wasn't about politics, it was about respect for the office, but that line fell flat. For critics, it sounded rehearsed, a justification dressed as professionalism. And for D.L. Hughley, it was proof that the industry was still trapped in the same old cycle, using cultural icons to sell neutrality while real issues went untouched. Then came the memes. Uncle Snoop for president. From death row to the White House, the internet turned outrage into comedy, because that's what it does. But behind every joke was a sigh, a feeling that something sacred had been lost. And while fans debated, the silence from Snoop's camp grew louder. No statements, no explanations, just cryptic laughter in interviews and an occasional joke online, as if to say, I'm still untouchable. But in 2025, nothing is untouchable. Every clip, every caption, every contradiction lives forever. That's when the deeper questions began. What does authenticity even mean when survival requires compromise? When the same system that once rejected you now pays you to represent it? For many fans, that's the heartbreak. Watching a rebel they trusted become the establishment he once mocked. And maybe that's why this story hit harder than most. Because it's not really about Snoop versus D.L. Hughley or Katt Williams. It's about what happens to heroes when they outlive their rebellion. When staying relevant means betraying your own legend. Hip-hop was built on rebellion, but it also built its stars into empires. And empires don't run on outrage, they run on diplomacy, money, and survival. Maybe Snoop's just playing the same game he always has, just at a higher level. Maybe he's not changing. Maybe he's just revealing the cost of longevity. Still, perception is everything. And once the internet decides what your motives are, it's almost impossible to rewrite the story. Weeks after the performance, the headlines slowed down, but the comments didn't. Every new post Snoop made had people reminding him of that one night. Every old clip became a receipt. Every silence became an admission. That's how it works now. You don't have to fall publicly. The internet will quietly turn your name into a question mark. And yet, there's something almost tragic about it, because Snoop has spent 3 decades evolving, surviving, adapting. From gangsta rapper to pop culture icon, he's performed at the Super Bowl, shared the screen with Martha Stewart, coached youth football, narrated nature shows. He became everything the system said he couldn't be. And maybe, just maybe, that's what this moment reveals most: the tension between the man and the myth. He built a legend on defiance, and now that same legend is being used to question his right to evolve. The rebel image that made him rich is the same one that's boxing him in. That's the irony. You can outgrow your mistakes, but you can't outgrow your persona. So now, as the smoke settles, we're left with a bigger question, not just about Snoop, but about hip-hop itself. Can authenticity survive fame, or does fame eventually eat the very truth it was built on? Because every generation has its reckoning. And for this one, it's realizing that even legends have to make choices between purity and power. D.L. Hughley didn't just call out hypocrisy, he forced hip-hop to look in the mirror, to ask whether it still represents rebellion or if it's just another piece of the machine. And Snoop, knowingly or not, has become the case study for that question. Maybe he didn't cross a line. Maybe he just exposed how blurry the lines become and don't go anywhere. Click the next video you see on your screen for even more juicy celebrity chaos, betrayals, and stories Hollywood doesn't want you to know. See you in the next one.